Thank you, everyone, for your patience. Sorry that we're starting a little bit late. Welcome to tonight's webinar, Advocacy in Action, a guide to local special education parent advisory committee, presented by RIPIN. I'm Jen Enos, and I will be facilitating tonight's webinar. RIPIN has been helping Rhode Islanders for over 30 years to navigate healthcare, special education, and healthy aging. We operate in a peer model, meaning when you call us, the person who answers has personal experience in caring for a loved one with special needs. RIPIN is home to the State Designated Parent Center. If you go to any state in the country, you will find at least one parent center, if not more. RIPIN has held this designation for over 30 years. In addition to supporting families navigating special education, we also provide technical assistance to LACs and school districts around organizing your local advisory committee. Just a few housekeeping items for tonight. So we will be recording this presentation for training purposes. If you have a question, please type it in the chat and our presenters will answer them throughout the webinar. We also request that when you ask your questions, please be sure to leave out any identifying information, such as the name of a student or the school. With that said, I would like to introduce our presenters tonight, Deb Belanger and Bethany Hogan.
Hold on one second. Here we go. Hello, everyone. Welcome to tonight's presentation, which in the short version, it's our SEAC overview. We're happy that you all came tonight, and Bethany and I have been doing this a couple of times. So we also have this recorded on our YouTube page and also on our website. This is a workshop that we've been doing on and off for quite a few years. What I'm going to do is pull up and share my screen, the PowerPoint, but I probably should do the little bit of who I am and then let Bethany say who she is, because I think that's probably appropriate. All right, so I'm Deb Belanger. I have been at RIPIN for a long time, and I have an adult son with developmental disabilities, autism, and a whole bunch of different things, along with two other kids, 3 grandkids, and I just love local advisory committees. I was very active in mine before I came to RIPIN, and have been working with others at RIPIN on training other local advisory committees around the state. Bethany, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Bethany Hogan. I've been with RIPIN for a little over 5 years now. I have 2 boys with IEPs, and I have been involved with my district's LAC in one way or another for about 10 years. And Deb and I have done this presentation before, and we love this guidebook. So we're pretty excited to bring you this content.
So we're going to be going through this tonight. We're going to have some spots in between where we're going to stop, we're going to pause, we're going to look for questions, because you know, stuff like this can get dry, and it's really important that we're engaging you in the conversation. So we're going to present, we're going to stop. Bethany and I are going to go back and forth. We're going to try to answer questions. We don't have all the answers, but we're going to give it our best shot. And I am going to share my screen and hopefully be sharing some other resources with you as we move forward. And let me see if this is going to work. Bethany, can you see my screen? All righty. Let me just move this. All right. So let's get started. First, we want to tell you guys that this is a presentation. It's actually a national presentation that was created back in 2019. There's a guidebook that there's actually an online guidebook that I'm going to pull up later for you guys to take a look at. And we're going to drop the links into the chat. But that's what we're going to be moving through. And so let me just give you some other guidance. So you're going to hear LAC, you're going to hear SEAC, you're going to hear CLAC, you're going to hear CPAC. There are a lot of acronyms that all mean the same thing. So there's some sort of a special education advisory committee. And for this presentation, you're going to probably hear me go back and forth. The guidebook refers to CPAC, but I'm probably going to use what Rhode Island uses, which is CLAC. So again, this is a printable version. We're going to also show you the online version of this and kind of go through it because it really is a great tool for local advisory committees to work with.
So the book that we're referring to, which is this one right here, Deb will be showing it to you in its digital form shortly. It
Bethany,
was
excuse me 1 second.
Yes.
You can see the slide?
I can.
It's not showing. Okay, go ahead. Sorry to interrupt.
No, that's
It's not
okay.
showing
I
here.
can definitely see it. If
Okay.
anyone's having issues with seeing it, please put it in the chat and we will do our best to fix that. So this guidebook was produced by the United States Department of Education, specifically the programs by the Center for Parent Information and Resources. And basically they spoke with states around the country to see what their best practices were in working with getting parents to the table and best practices. Rhode Island was one of those states that was interviewed. And we were happy to report out on the best practices that we see here. And some of those best practices are actually included in the guidebook. That again, Deb is going to drop the link in and you're going to see a little bit later, but you can take a look at it at your leisure and see some of the things that Rhode Island and other parent centers are seeing around the country. Deb did say that there are many different ways that people refer to these committees, CLAC, LAC, CPAC. Unfortunately, I have a habit of it being a LAC, so that's how you're going to hear me refer to it this evening. But the key terms in this whole conversation are going to be parent and advisory, and you're going to hear us use those words over and over again. And it was created, this guidebook was created as a tool for schools and districts to help develop and maintain their local committees.
Bethany, give me 1 second. I want to get that link, but in order to do that, give me a second, everyone. Oops.
Sure.
Here's the link. Here's what the book looks like. We're going to come back to this in a minute, but I want to at least drop this into the chat. Let me pull this
Thanks,
back
Deb.
up. Oops, wrong one. And this is when everything starts to go messy. I knew this was going to happen. Oh, from the current slide. There we go. Go ahead, Bethany. I apologize.
No apologies necessary. Technology is our friend. Please remember. And so as we talk about this guidebook tonight, we'll be talking about how to best use it. And it's broken down into 3 parts: establishing and running an effective CLAC. The second part is geared specifically toward parent centers, or what we call PTICs, or who Deb and I are part of at RIPIN. And then the third part are the resources and tools that Deb is going to be really happy to share with you a little bit later. I will tell you personally, having been part of revamping a LAC a few years back, getting a LAC that kind of stalled out back up and running. Part 1 was my best friend for about a year. Absolutely.
So here's where we're going to kind of talk about Rhode Island a little bit. To be honest with you, the regulations really don't have a lot in there. And this is kind of the basic requirements of any working local advisory committee. You're required to meet minimally 4 times a year. There are some local advisory committees, that's really all they do. The committee meets that many times. They might do additional presentations and things like that, but the committee work takes place 4 times a year. You need to have written agendas and take minutes. The majority of that group needs to be 51% needs to be parents of students with disabilities. The better, well, I shouldn't say the better run, but a good diverse group of individuals also includes educators, community members. Sometimes there's a school committee person, but the committee itself needs to have at least 51% that are parents of students with disabilities to be a legit committee. You want it to be diverse. You want to hopefully have it made up of different parents of different age children. I mean, in a perfect world, that's what it would be. You would hopefully have a person with a disability, a public school administrator, general ed, special education teachers. Again, when you're talking about working together and collaborating with the district, it's important that you have a good mixed group of people. At the end of the school year, you need to have an annual report, and that report is given to the special ed director and administration, who are required to have local advisory committees, and then usually are presenting that possibly to the school committee or the superintendent. But the overall goal of LACS is it's intended to increase the involvement of parents of students with disabilities in policy making and decision making. That's what makes them an advisory group. So the CIACs kind of sit in this place in the middle. They are advising administration, but they also sit in the middle of hearing the needs from parents and how are they getting information into the hands of parents in your school district. So we'll talk more about that as we go along. I just want to, we'll keep asking Jen if there's any questions so far. And I'm thinking it's pretty quiet at the moment. But I do want to open it up in case there is.
Yep, no questions just yet. So
Okay.
I'll let you know.
All right. Thanks, Jen.
Deb, if I can just add something that we tend to jump in with when we talk about parents of students with disabilities, we do like to add that parents of students with disabilities who are currently enrolled in the district.
That's thank you, Bethany. That's an important, a lot of committees have found that out the hard way. Let's just put it this way. Somebody at my age, unless I have a child or I'm a guardian or parent, somehow legal guardian of a child or a grandchild even, could be on that committee. But you want to have the people that should be sitting there should be actively involved in their school system. And sometimes when people stay around for too long, that things can get stuck. People aren't allowed to move forward. New voices aren't allowed to kind of get involved. So we really do encourage you to add that to that. Thank you, Bethany.
So we did get a few questions pop up in the chat. So
Okay.
the first one is, do we need to file with SOS?
We just talked about that earlier with the Secretary of State website. So, and I know Bethany's going to let me answer this one. So the answer is, we're not sure. Here's the thing. It hasn't been so much tested. Best practice is we encourage you to do that. It's best practice. You're covered. You're covered. You're putting that information out there. It also secures that you're taking an agenda and you're getting it out there into the public. You minimally have to find ways to get your meetings to the public. This isn't a closed group. This isn't a PTA where there's just a small group in a particular school or a sit team. This is a group that is open to the public. Now, we're not decision making. This is not necessarily a decision making group, but we strongly encourage LACS to work with their school district, get the information into the hands of all families if they can, but certainly families of children with disabilities as to when they're meeting, what the agenda is, what we're going to be talking about, why do you want to get involved? And it, it's in other cases, people are putting it in local free newspapers back in the day when people were reading newspapers, but some people are putting it on Facebook pages. There's a lot of different ways, but you want to work with your school department on that. So that was a long answer to a short question, which is no one's really tested it yet, but best practice would be to do that.
Thanks, Deb. And then we had another question, which was, will this presentation be available after? I know at the beginning that you both mentioned that you have previous ones on our YouTube channel, but I don't know if the participant was referring to this one specifically.
So after this is over, we're definitely going to, once it's recorded, and as long as we don't have any major faux pas, anything that we would go back and go, probably shouldn't have said that. Yes, we will be sending that to you. And there is one already available in the toolkit on the RIPIN website, which hopefully I can show you near the end where that is too.
And then finally, we did have one comment that, it's also really helpful to have a student participate in your local advisory committee.
We strongly encourage youth leaders to be involved. This is who we're talking about. This is really, it should be less about parents and educators and more about students. So again, something we were talking about just before, but there's a lot of youth and they should feel this way. It's like, we shouldn't be talking about anything about me without me, right? That should be kind of our claim to fame. So if you get them, if you can find good youth people that want to be involved, and it's hard, but to get some that are active, but yes, let them have a voice, let them hear what's going on and listen to what they have to say.
Thanks.
All righty then, let me move to the next slide. Thank you. Those were great questions. So let's talk a little bit about how a LAC is different than a PTO, a support group, an advocacy group. And I've heard a lot from LACs over the years, and RIPIN's heard a lot. And so I'm going to start with what a CLAC isn't. And it's not necessarily an advocacy group that focuses on like one particular issue and trying to create change from outside the system. It really is, we're all advocates. As a parent, we automatically become advocates. And there's advocacy that happens when we speak and advise the school district on unmet needs of students with disabilities. But we're not necessarily banging down doors and confronting and kind of going against. We are working collaboratively to create change within the system. We're not focusing on one issue. Again, we're focusing on lots of things that affect a lot of children. And again, PTOs, they're fantastic groups. They're out there looking at a lot more recreational, even classroom activities, fundraisers, but local advisory committees are not there to raise funds. If you need a budget, if you have a speaker, if you have a plan for the upcoming school year and you'd like to have an outside speaker come in and maybe there's a fee, that's something you could work with your school department, see if they have a budget to support that, what other kind of things. But as far as fundraising goes, no, there should be, and I couldn't tell you what kind of money or even if there is any out there, but it's very clear that that's how school departments or districts are supposed to be supporting local advisory committees when there's a practical need. I don't know if that's something, Bethany, that you want to add to that, if there's anything that you've done on your committee related to budget.
So I can, it varies district to district, of course. I can tell you that I had a lovely chat with my special ed director just the other day, and she told me that they were going to be putting more money into the LAC budget for more speakers and workshops for next year.
Whoa, that's
very
awesome.
exciting, right? So it's a matter of obviously what is available to your district. I mean, if you're, if your district is in the hole, you're going to have a difficult time finding someone to secure funds for you. But there's, to my knowledge, there's always a little kind of slush fund available for LACs, for an activity or a speaker, year to year. I know that in my district, it's always been a line item. It was never very big, but it was always there.
Something, and usually around somehow with IDEA dollars. I mean, again, that's what this is all about. And I just was looking at my notes here. I wanted to actually quote Bethany, because Bethany actually says this in our recorded version, but she said, advisories look to inform processes and strategies. Rather, the advocates look to work on a very narrow single issue. One of the things that when you're getting parent leaders, sometimes you'll have parents that want to come in and they want things that affect their child. You're really looking for leaders who recognize that system changes about everyone's child. And so that really is where a lot of times that looks different. And let me go a little bit further. So its purpose is to help improve educational outcomes for all students, including students with disabilities. We don't decide on policy. We're not there saying we should have, but we certainly have that influence to be able to talk about needs and challenges that students with disabilities have. And they do provide that direct input to those district leaders. District leaders also have the responsibility of sharing data with local advisory committees. What kind of information are they required to report on to Rhode every year? Maybe it has to do with the number of students who are graduating with IEPs. There could be lots of information, but it's important that local advisories have a good idea of what's happening in their school district. And that's what your administrator can help you with. Bethany, what are you thinking?
Parent driven. So this is parent driven is a very different concept than parent responsibility. And let me explain what that means. Parents are going to drive the ideas and the voice of the district. And they're going to bring that to district leadership. If you've heard me do this webinar before, you've heard the bus example, and I'm going to use it again because it is the best example I have of how a LAC works and how it works well in a district. When I started on my LAC in my district, my son is 17 now, so we're going way, way back. But there was an issue that was affecting multiple families across the district, all different schools, all different ages. And the issue was their kiddos with disabilities were getting on the bus and they were having behavior problems on the bus. And the bus drivers and the bus monitors, who were within their own right, they were trained to drive the bus and be a bus monitor, and certainly were not trained on how to deal with behaviors stemming from frustration over communication or what have you. And so kids were coming off the bus, they're frustrated, they're crying, the bus drivers are complaining, they're not happy, and parents are kind of just really upset. And so we as a group came together, we discussed how this was a problem affecting so many of our kids across the district. And we went to our special education director and our special education director said, okay, I hear you. How do you think we can fix this? And as parents of kids with disabilities, we said, well, could we get them some training? Because that helps everything. Mm-hmm. And our special education director went to district leadership, and district leadership said, we think that's a great idea. And so the special ed director, the district leadership, the bus company, everybody worked collaboratively. The drivers and the monitors got training on de-escalation techniques and just a little bit of basic training on, working with kids with different kinds of disabilities. And suddenly those significant issues that we were seeing across the district really were quelled. I'm not saying that everybody's problem went away, but I'm saying as a whole, it was not something that you were hearing about as often anymore because everybody really benefited from just having a little bit of training. And that is really how a LAC is supposed to work, right? The LAC is the bridge from the families to, the special ed director. And then the special ed director brings in district leadership and everybody kind of works in collaboration. We always say it's best to come to the table. If you're coming to the table with a problem, maybe also come with a possible solution or solutions, right? Because everybody is a little bit more willing to listen if you've got some great ideas on how to address the concerns. And so just really finally, just to kind of wrap up this bus, example, really effective districts who have really effective kind of communication across the board have special education directors who are seeking out parent feedback from their parent leaders.
Mhm.
And they're concentrating on how this impacts other families, other parents in the district. It's not a family going off and saying, well, we're having a problem with the bus, so I'm going to call the bus company and I'm going to tell them they need to go get training. That's not how this works. It's everybody working in collaboration to get those positive outcomes.
That was great, Bethany. It is a really perfect example of looking at the unmet needs of students. I mean, it kind of fell into your lap and talk about parent driven. You brought it forward and you came up with a potential solution. And that's how change happens.
And honestly, here we are, 13 years later, and people are still saying, remember when the bus drivers got trained and how great that was? And it's just like a normal practice now, right? It's just part of the training.
Yep.
It's normal. It's the norm. You get trained as a bus driver and you get trained to work with kids with disabilities. And it's just, it benefits everybody. Sorry,
Absolutely.
Jen, I know you're here because there are questions in the chat.
So no, and I'm only jumping in because you're on the parent driven, and the question in the chat right now is, what if there is not a parent led LAC in the district? And there right now are only school led presentations. How do you take control and make it parent led? So
That's a good question.
Good question.
Well, first of all, you go back to that first slide. That's not a local advisory committee. Now, the district might think that, but there's no minutes, there's no committee members, and there's no agenda. So don't get me wrong, that's wonderful that they're having presentations for families. But what I've heard from other leaders who have done this, who have literally taken this presentation and gone to a special ed director, maybe with a couple of other parents, sent an email, said, we want to implement this. How can we work together? Because at the end of the day, local advisory committees are on a list of what they call indicators. So the state every few years comes in and audits the district special education department. They'll come in, they'll do random checks of IEPs, and there's all these different, I don't know how many, I should know, there's like maybe 20 different indicators. And one of them on there is their local advisory committee. Now, they're not looking for a whole bunch. They're looking for your leadership list. They're looking for a lot of the basics. But they are the ones that are ultimately required to host and have a local advisory committee. 20 years ago, we would just be thinking that not that it was a rogue group, but it was up to parents to do everything. It was up to parents to get together and make all this happen. The reality is it's the school departments that are accountable to make sure that happens. So it is important that you bring that to their attention. You might even want to send a copy of the presentation to them. They can listen to this conversation, and they might even call us back, but that is the way to do it. And now the other side, I'm going to play devil's advocate a little bit. You've got to want to have leaders, parent leaders, that are going to agree to disagree, that they're not there to, kind of butt heads, to yell and scream and demand. That's not a committee. It's just not. A committee is working together. Like the example that Bethany just said, she talked about, from this busing issue. Well, and I'll play this out in an imaginary way. Let's say that LAC had 4 goals for the upcoming school year, right? And they prioritized. There was 10 people, everybody, they had 20 different ideas, and they worked it down to these 4, and then they prioritized what they were going to work on first. And then this happened. This might have jumped the line. This might be something which makes it parent driven. Is this more important right now than some of the other goals that we wanted to work on this school year? So again, I'm going off on a tangent, and I do apologize, but I would really encourage you to reach out to your special education director, send them the video, let them know that you and maybe some other parents are interested in developing the local advisory committee the way it's meant to be, created and coordinated.
And just to add, because I feel like I heard Jen say that the question was about a lack that isn't parent driven. And I just want to go back, as Deb was talking about those first couple of slides. If it's not 51% parents of kiddos with disabilities, they cannot be, no one can call it a lack, because that's not what it is.
Right.
It's something else, and it sounds like it's something great, but it's not a lack.
Definitely not.
And so I really encourage, again, I was part of taking a lack that had lapsed and getting it back on its feet. And the guidebook that we're sharing with you tonight, I used it as a step-by-step. We as the leadership team use it as a step-by-step guide to get it up and running. And that also included how to have those communications and those conversations with our district leadership and with our special education director. Your special education director needs to be at the heart of this.
They really do.
That's just, if you're not there, you're not going to make any progress forward. So I agree with Deb, send this along, send along a community. That's how we did it. We went to our special ed director and we said, hey, we really want to get this rolling again. What do we do? And she was like, let me help you. And we were like, yay. And the rest is history. Here we are.
So again, to get that started, that would be a suggestion as you email and you start that moving forward. Let's continue to move through the rest of this presentation so you can see more around what it entails. It's not, you'll hear me say, so yeah, you've got a lack. Why do people want to come to it? If you don't have a good reason and a plan and a goal and why you're meeting, because it's not a complaint, it's not like a support group, and it's not there to just bring all problems. It really is a working group. But let's keep moving forward, and maybe we'll generate some more questions around that also. Okay, so these are actually, this kind of ties in with what we were just talking about. So this is what districts can do, right? This is kind of that slide. How can they support families? Bethany, do you want to move forward with this part?
Sure. I'm certainly not going to go through all of these, but really quickly, what can districts be providing to families to help them look beyond this my kid? Okay, we need to get past what's good for my kid and talk about what all of us, right, all of our kiddos with disabilities. And I know and you've heard me say this before, what's good for my Ryan and what's good for my Logan is going to benefit others and vice versa. And so if I'm working for all kids, I'm benefiting my own as well. So what can districts, support families, how can districts give information to families that are going to help them see that bigger picture? I like to think of what are we in the middle of right now? So we just did Survey Works, right?
Yep.
And I love Survey Works, which I know sounds crazy, right? But I do love Survey Works because at the end of that process, my district is able to say to me, okay, well, of the, 1,500 surveys that we got back, only 40 were parents of students with IEPs. And so
And
when
here's
I
what they
when
had to
I
say.
absorb that information, I can go back to my LAC and I can say, okay, we have a problem, because if we're concerned about the things that are happening within our district, but we're not making our voice heard through the channels that are being offered to us, for example, Survey Works, we have some work to do. We have some work to do within, our own group. So that's just one example. Deb, did you want to add to that?
No, I was just going to say, and so if all 40 of those people have wonderful experiences and you don't, that's not going to be an accurate depiction, or quite the opposite. If they've all have awful experiences and you're having a wonderful experience, all of that information really needs to be available so the district can create its own priority areas. I talked to you about already how the district monitors. You could, monitors every few years. If you have concerns, you could start right off with having your special ed director or someone they designate. I want to say that it might, if it's not your director, they might designate someone to be the point person. But when was our last school support visit? Do we have any areas that were non-compliant? How are we working on those things? What's happening with that? One of the ways they also, the ones that I've seen, I'm thinking maybe this is happening in your district, Bethany, but the special ed director comes to a meeting with their director's notes. That's how also the state advisory committee works, so that David Cienko, who is the head of the special education department, basically, that covers a lot of different areas at Rhode, but he'll always have a director's report. So that person is bringing information to your local advisory committee. Say, what's going on in the district? Oh, a bunch of teachers have just been trained on Orton Gillingham or something like, something about that would connect with certainly students with disabilities. So that's another piece. Their role is to figure out how to value parent voice. I think that's really the bottom line. There are some districts that are wonderful, when a family, may even come to a LAC meeting and they're very upset, and they'll be the first ones to say, let's talk after this meeting. Let you and I talk, because we don't want to talk about your child in this public meeting. Let's do that and figure things out. There are school districts in our state that we rarely get calls from because they handle things, they try to work with families right at that local level. So again, there's a lot of ways for CX to help facilitate that work and that collaboration.
Absolutely.
Any questions before we move on?
So yeah, just so basically, if a special ed director isn't very supportive with creating or starting a LAC, is there a specific way to kind of move forward with that process of creating a LAC in a district that doesn't have one currently?
So, when you say it always concerns me, there's more to a story there, right? So if you're putting something in writing and you're presenting some information, you and maybe I would always encourage there to be more than just one person, that you're reaching out in that way and you're not getting a response or you're getting something else. You can go up the chain of command. It's unfortunate. You really want to be able to do that right at that level. You could also, there have to be other people involved that you want to have those conversations with. And ultimately, it is a special ed director that is responsible for making sure there's a local advisory committee group. Now, there may be some out there that are like, yeah, I don't want to, but then you need to go right up to the school committee if you need to. That would be after the superintendent. And I would encourage that if that's what needs to happen. But do your due diligence first. Put your stuff in writing, know what you're asking for, share our information, share this so that they can also become more aware of those processes. And maybe that's just what they need. I hope that helps a little bit. Okay. Let's move on to Bethany is going to do a little bit about the quick start guide. And I'm trying to decide if I should pull that up for a minute, page 17. Why don't you, Bethany, go through this slide first, and then I'll stop for a minute and we'll pull up those pages. Okay.
So back a few minutes ago, I told you that when we were getting our LAC back up and running, I went to the book and we used it as like a checklist. This is what I was talking about, this quick start guide. It's amazing. It's a checklist, and it takes you through the process of literally how to get up and running. And I'm not going to spend a whole bunch of time on each one of these, but I hear so many districts talking about, how do we engage families? How do we get families to the table? We, again, right, 51% needs to be families with kiddos with disabilities. How do we get them to the table? Because I know, as a mom of 2 kids with disabilities, that getting out of the house at 6 o'clock at night is sometimes impossible. So how can we ensure that? And that could look like a lot of different things. It's going to vary district to district based on what your district's needs are. That could look like maybe childcare. That could look like snacks. Snacks always bring people to the table. I'm not going to lie. A hybrid option where maybe you're having a meeting in person, but you also have a camera hooked up and you're streaming it so that the folks at home who are cooking dinner for their kiddos or who are monitoring a tube feed can still listen and be part of that conversation. Again, it's going to depend on the needs of your particular parents in your district. We sent out a survey and we said, hey, folks, we want to make sure we can get the most of you to this table. What night would be best? What location would be best? How many of you would participate if it was hybrid? Like, how can we help get you here? And we took that information, we collated it as a leadership team, and we said, okay, the best possible outcome based on these responses is that we're going to meet at this library in the center of town on this particular night of the week, and we're going to offer a hybrid option. That's what we came up with for our district based on the needs that we saw. Roles and responsibilities. One person should not be responsible for every single thing in a committee. Mm-hmm. You don't want to be the person who's doing all the work in a group work project, right? And it's the same thing. No, everybody needs to carry a little piece of this, and your leadership, whatever that looks like. For example, my LAC, we have a couple of co-chairs, we have a secretary, and it's all very helpful, and the load is balanced out. And then just the diversity piece. I love when I go to a LAC meeting in my district because I always see my special education director. I always see a school committee member, and he is there to deliver his school committee report, what has happened over the course of the month that may affect our committee. We're going to see staff, we're going to see related service providers, parents, grandparents, individuals, kiddos, students with disabilities. And I know when I sit at that table that we are getting the best voices at that table because we're getting all of the voices at that table. Deb, you want to bring up the page? What do you think?
So I want to look at the notes too. I'm going to guess, Bethany, that you have ground rules at your meeting. So,
oh yeah. So we announce them before at the beginning of every meeting. Yep. Having someone who's able to facilitate a meeting, you want to have a plan. You're always having a plan. You're having a plan for the person that could come in and try to kind of disrupt the agenda. Absolutely. You want to, really have those strategies, those things that say, oh, okay, listen, this person can talk to you
after the meeting, or here's who you want to connect with, and we're gonna, keep moving along with our meeting. One of the things I will say that we used for years in our district, and I say it all the time, is if you want to be seen as a positive, solution focused, not afraid to handle tough issues group, but really you do two things that are really important. You recognize good practices. You take time. If you want to look at a local advisory committee that does phenomenal when it comes to acknowledging good practices, you go and visit the East Providence Local Advisory Committee. You start there. They have an annual event that's been going on for I don't know how many years, and they make sure, it's like, sure, we're working on the hard stuff every single day, but we're going to take time to acknowledge some of the good work that's happening. So that's one thing. And also, as you look at your minutes, don't keep the minutes in for just the people in the room. We used to send our minutes out to our school principals and ask them to share that in their weekly newsletters or whatever it was, so that the parents in their district or in their school were seeing that this group was happening, and that included the recognitions. So we'd always have recognitions on our agenda, including all those other things. So there's a lot of little tips like that. Let me really quick, because I want to also be mindful of the time. But let me see if I can see, there's already way too many things up here on my screen that are already getting in the way of me getting to where I want to be. So it said, let me take a minute. So this is the online link, and you see this table of contents. This is where everything it can be easily assessed. The problem is I don't know where page was that we were talking about. So I think what I'm going to do is wait till the end when I go to the resources, and that stuff's probably going to be in there, because I don't want to stop everything right now for this. So let me go back to where I was, close this down, and bring it back to here. And we will come back to looking at more of those tips and strategies. And so on the next area is part 2, which is really talks about kind of what are the role, who supports these parent centers, and that's on page 38 to 51, and you can look at that more. But I really want to, just for a little bit, talked about ESSA, the Every Student Succeeds Act. That replaced No Child Left Behind back in 2015. And the goal of that is to have equal opportunity for all students, right? And the big piece of that law was about parent and family engagement. It's always been important. Schools aren't just supposed to invite families or put out a flyer and say, oh, well, nobody came, so therefore parents aren't interested. They really have a requirement where they really need to show those efforts that they're making to engage families. The local advisory committee is a perfect place for that to happen. It's sometimes that plan is overlooked for special education and parent engagement, but the reality is that's why. So what you're advocating for this to happen, and Nicole, you said earlier, you're kind of having trouble with getting that up and running. Your district is required to show how they're engaging families, and it more than just having them show up for a presentation, but really where are they having a voice in policy making, decision making in the school district. So what we do as a parent center, and some of you may already know about this, is because we're a small state, people don't have to drive very far to go to the Special Education Advisory Network meeting, the Sean meeting, which we had last week at Cello's. First time in person since 2019. It was great to see everybody again. And that goal is to bring around the leaders, the parent leaders, and the special ed directors from local advisory committees, bring them together to network. And that group is kind of an in-between place between the state and the districts to get the information. And we had 2 great presentations. So if you're not already coming to the Sean meetings, you really want to start participating in those. There's also RIPIN, the Rhode Island State Special Education Advisory Committee. Every state in the country is supposed to have one of those. We kind of model this guidebook really models what RIPIN is doing. They have a plan every year. They have a strategic planning at the beginning of the year. They have breakout groups. I mean, they're very comprehensive. Those are open to the public. And if you ever want to see, look at a model, that wouldn't be another place to check them out. The booklet, the guide itself, has some examples from other states. And again, with the emphasis on parent engagement to really get these advisory committees established. Anywhere, let's see here. Oh, it's still me. Okay. So, there's tools and resources in this book. There are PDFs, there's Word documents that you can download and make into your own, which is what we really loved. I mean, the book itself, we have we're in there somewhere, Rhode Island's in there somewhere, but it really took information from advisory groups from around the country to create this. A lot of great examples. There's sample job descriptions, and people are like, job description, why would you want that? So what's really important if you're trying to put a committee together is, number one, what's in it for that person's like, so what's in it for me and what do you expect from me? We call it a job description, but really it could just be a description of what's expected. If I'm on this, okay, well, you're expected to minimally attend 4 meetings out of a year. It might say, how do you participate in that meeting? It might give some real specifics, and there's some great examples in there. There's examples of mission statement. When I was in a local advisory committee, I never really thought about a mission statement, but I'll be honest with you, there's some great groups out there that really use that as a way to stay focused. Is what we're doing, or all the activities or the goals, do they tie in with what our mission is? And that can be sometimes really helpful. There's also action sheets, like how to move things forward. Everyone's got an opinion. There's never a lack of opinions in any kind of committee. You'll have more opinions and more ideas than you ever know what to do with. But what matters is who's willing to do the work. Do we have the resources? How are we going to manage that? Is this too big for 1 year? Should we put it off? So there's a lot of ways to really help you kind of attack and kind of navigate these next steps. So here's now where I'm supposed to stop and show you everything. But before I do that, before I kind of dig into the booklet itself, is there any questions, Jen, that you want to bring forth? Some might be answered as I move forward, but.
Sure. Yeah. So one of them was, will there be a PDF of this presentation available after the meeting? That's one. So I don't know if you have an answer to that.
We might be able to do that. We might be able to do that. We'll
and
see.
Then the next one is about the Sean meeting. So what does it stand for? How do families learn about those meetings? Maybe you can explain a little bit more about the Sean meetings.
So it, again, as I said, it's called the Special Education Advisory Network. That's the acronym, Sean. We've been doing it now for, I don't know, 12 years, 13 years. It's not open to families. It's open to parent leaders, LAC leaders. This isn't, first of all, it can be expensive, these dinner meetings. I mean, we did for the last 2 years, we did that all virtually. But you would get invited through your special ed director or your LAC leader to be able to attend. And anybody on the leadership team of your local advisory committee is absolutely welcome to attend. But like I said, you want those working members. The information that you're going to receive there, you want to be able to take it back to the district and share it with families or administrators so that it's kind of like this two-way information flow. Is there anything else in here, Sean? Okay. All right. So with that said, let me open up again. Let me see if I can get myself out of here. go here. Of course, now lose where I was. All right, so here's the online version. Again, this is what you looked at earlier. I'm going to go back to the front page. This is what the booklet looks like, the hardcover booklet. It's great to read through all of this. You will see the parent centers that had some input into this in different places. It talks about part 1, part 2. They surveyed more than 400 parent-centered leaders in order to put this together. So it's pretty comprehensive. Right here, navigating the website starts with the table of contents. This whole booklet can be downloaded into a PDF and be printed. So if you wanted all your leaders to have copies of this, you know, that's a way that you could work with your school department to get that information. That would be a great request if you wanted a hard copy version. What I'm going to do is go down here to resources, and I'm going to click on organizational resources. So it starts with some great websites that we have used. Believe it or not, the PTA website has got phenomenal resources on how to increase parent engagement. Another great one that we like is called Beyond the Bake Sale. I actually have the hard copy book, and it's really for schools to look at how parent friendly is my school? You know, who's sitting at the front desk? I mean, there's a lot of times, I mean, where families don't feel welcome at a school. So if they're not feeling welcome physically at their school, why would they want to join your local advisory committee? You got to think about, you know, and that's part of what the schools need to be considering in this process. So over here, tools for change. This is that startup checklist that Bethany was referring to, that she kind of used. You can download this. Now I'm going to click on this button and see what happens. And hopefully you can't hear the dog in the background right now with the squeak toy that my husband is supposed to be having the dog right now. That's all right. It's all recorded, Jim. It's now in. Thank you. Okay, so this is again, another PDF, lots of information. That job description I was telling you about, there's stuff there. There's samples of mission statements, how to create flyers. Why should I attend? You've got to think about that, not just drive at, we need to have a LAC, but what do you want the LAC to do? Why? You got to be able to pitch that in a way that makes sense. There's sample bylaws. There's kind of these agendas and minutes. So there's a lot of information in here that can really be extremely helpful. When we had our Sean meeting last week, North Providence is working closely with their special ed director, who literally took the video, sat down with this group. They've got, if anyone was there, you know that they've got now a fairly good sized group. They went through line by line, developing bylaws, doing lots of these pieces. And now people want to come because there's a plan. It's just not a group of people sitting around and, I hate to say it, but complaining of, we trust us. We're in the world of knowing when things are broken. No one calls us because things are going wonderful. The local advisory committees have the opportunity to really create a lot of positive change. Let me go back up to the top here and get out of this version. Download worksheets in Word documents, so you can make them your own. You don't have to, you can actually replicate them easily. They've gone to make sure even the flyers and things like that, there's a lot of that already in place for you to play around with. So with that said, I'm going to get back out of here. I'm going to try to get back out of here and get back over to this slide and hand this back over to Bethany to kind of finish up. Whoops, that was too far. Okay.
No, you were right. The next one.
Oh, I was, see,
You
See,
did that one.
the dog definitely tripped me up. There we go.
Okay. So this concept that, the CLAC is more than just a meeting, it's a mindset. I say this every time we present, and I know that it seems a little bit corny, but it's completely accurate. And I'm speaking as a parent who, 14 years ago walked into her first LAC meeting because I thought that it was a place that I could air my grievances and I could pound my fist because I was mad that things were not going the way that I anticipated, the way that I expected. And I was upset and I was going to have a captive audience. And that is my history. That is honest. That is where I come from. I was that really terrible parent who was going to take your agenda and run it off the rails.
She was. I can verify that.
I was. I'm not proud of it. However,
No, it's
I've made a
okay.
little bit of progress.
Yes, you have.
And so here's the thing, and Deb said it, right? People call RIPIN because things aren't going well. And people tend to walk into their first LAC meeting because things aren't going well. And at the heart of a really great LAC is a special education director who is going to listen and validate. I was lucky enough for many years in my district to have a special education director who, first of all, tolerated me when I was at my worst, but then listened and validated and wanted to work with me and with other families to make things better for the district. And we had the opportunity to not just sit in a meeting. We were part of the interview process for a new special education director when that came to be. I know another district who built a brand new, beautiful school, and their LAC was part of that conversation because how will kids with disabilities be navigating this enormous building? That's an important conversation to have. Our kids need to have that voice, and either they're bringing it or we're helping them to bring it. And so, being part of some of those conversations is just super. Again, what is good for one student with a disability is ultimately going to benefit the rest of the district. And so, a LAC, really the beauty of a LAC is it takes that teamwork concept of what really should happen in an IEP meeting, and it takes it one step further to help shaping, the programs and the policies at that local level.
Thanks, Bethany. That was awesome. And with that said, we are going to wrap it up with, if you want more information about RIPIN, about any of our webinars, I'm actually going to pull up the website while Jen probably brings us to the home stretch. And if there are any other questions, why don't I throw that out there? Is there any other questions?
Sure. So, well, first of all, there's a little shout out to North Providence that they have an awesome or an amazing, Facebook page. So I just want to recognize that.
Awesome.
And then it looks like one final question. So if or when a district or a group of parents were to get a forum in place, would RIPIN be willing to present this in person to a group of parents and teachers in our districts? So I don't know if you guys want to talk about RIPIN's role in supporting LACs.
So unfortunately, from a capacity standpoint, and due to the overwhelming amount of families looking for individual assistance, we've more than doubled phone calls from we are not able to do that. What we could do, what we are suggesting, is that you watch the video. That's why we're making these, is you're kind of watching them together as a group. We could we could maybe come in and do like a half hour follow up
Q&A.
to that once you like a Q&A to that, but we would like to see you kind of go through that process, get some of that started, and then get your questions together. And then Bethany and I, or one of us, or, could come and do a little bit, probably virtually at this point, because we're trying to, again, we are trying to get as much in as we can, and travel time is a lot. We're just not able to do it like we used to, but this has been a great tool. We've got, and let me just tell you what we're in Woonsocket, what they're doing with our webinars is they're bringing their families together. And for their Spanish speaking families, they've been getting them together for like coffee hours on Friday mornings, pulling us up on the screen even, or showing some of our stuff. And then we come in and do a little bit of a Q&A, but not to do kind of a full-fledged presentation, just to kind of answer. And they are getting people, because parents want to talk to the people at their level. That's who they're listening to, so just keep that in mind. We could do a little Q&A with you, but we really would encourage you to use the presentations.
And I just can't stress enough, just because I was in this place just a few years ago, that this guide is honestly a step-by-step to
Really
get you
is.
started. I was carrying it around with me like it was, my favorite toy for months and months and months. I was printing out pages and giving it to leadership, and our special ed director was sitting down with us, and I was giving her a copy, and we were using it as our toolkit, and it answered all of our questions. And I really implore you to take a look at the guide and to use it as it's intended, as a step-by-step guide. And then if you have questions, after watching the video with your leadership and after taking a look at the guide, please reach out. We're always happy to answer questions.
Especially emails, anything like that. So,
They'll eventually make it to my inbox, so feel free.
And again, keep your administrator, if it's not your special ed director, someone else that they've identified to do that. You need them in the conversation. They really need to be there. Can you guys see
that there's Deb, I'm sorry. I can see that there's questions about hard copies of the guide. So I can tell you that every special ed director in the state, every district and every charter school got a hard copy. It should be theoretically sitting in that person's office. However, with that said, there are a couple of different ways that you can go about getting yourself a hard copy. It's available online to print as a PDF. If you wanted to print all of those pages, you can print just the pages that you need, or you can actually reach out to SIPR, and they might mail you a hard copy. There are a couple of, so I don't know if that helps. Oh, Jen just put the thing in the chat. Thanks, Jen.
Yep. Can you see the website at the moment?
I can.
All right. Let me just show you where there are two things. Number one, I'm going to show you where right now where everything is housed, but we're going to be moving things around a little bit. Right now, everything is in resources. So if you go to our resources page, and you'll see all the stuff that we use, that we share with families all the time. And you go down, this should be in alphabetical order. It's called the Special Education Local Advisory Committee Toolkit. The presentation, not this one, but the one before is right here, that webinar. The booklet is right here. There's some other pieces in there you could take a look at. We also want to let you know that we have other webinars that are already pre-recorded. K through 12 special education. So this is our basic rights. That's broken down into 5 parts. We've got a bullying, there's a bunch of things, and there is also some in Spanish. We're continuing to work on stuff every day. This is the one that we just did like 2 weeks ago, which is a shortened version of basic rights. It's just an overview. It's done under an hour, and it covers a lot of information. But our favorite that's getting the most is the 504 workshop series. And these are 4 very brief conversations talking about these topic areas that can be really helpful to families. So with that said, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I think that was it. Those were oh yeah, okay, that was it.
Okay,
Ben,
so,
was there anything we missed?
so nope, it looks like, I think we've tackled everything. It seems as though some of our participants, oh, wait a minute, it looks like something, oh, so we just got to, this has been so helpful.
Oh, great.
And, oh, is there a survey, possibly for this webinar?
We will be sending you something tomorrow when we send you a copy of the presentation itself.
Okay, so then
And,
that was the other question is, again, would the participants be getting the slides because they found this really helpful? So
Yeah, be
wonderful.
patient with us. If it's not first thing tomorrow, which I can guarantee you it won't, just give us a little time, and before the weekend, you can look at it over Easter weekend. I'm sure you'll have plenty of time. We don't have certificates right now that are legit. We had some years ago, but if you had something that needed to be signed off on, I mean, we could probably do something like that.
So they
but-
already have my email as the contact person for this webinar, and I did have to put together a certificate last week
Okay.
for something else. Please feel free to reach out to me, bhogan@ripin.org, and I will make sure you get what you need.
Perfect. That's why I shouldn't be answering questions anymore. Thank you, Bethany. I appreciate that. I hope this was helpful. We both hope, actually all three of us hope it was helpful to you guys. So good luck. Don't give up. And hope to see you again soon.
Thanks, everybody, for
Thank you.
joining tonight. Have a good night.
Bye.